This demonstration covers the bandsaw, how it works and how to set it up safely. The bandsaw works, if I open the door up, this is a 14-inch bandsaw and it works with a 14-inch diameter wheel on the top and the bottom of the bandsaw. The blade itself is one 12-foot, usually 10, 12-foot long blade that's continuous. So if I turn it on, it's continuously running and cutting. So this saw cuts very quickly. So as it's cutting, or as it's running, the wheels are high centered, so the blade really isn't on there very tightly. So, to keep it from falling off, they put ball bearings, one on each side of the blade to make sure it doesn't go left or right. There's another ball bearing behind the blade to make sure it doesn't get pushed off as I'm cutting forward. There is nothing to stop it from coming off towards you if you're pulling back. So there's certain things you need to make sure to do so we don't pull the blade off the track. Now when you cut, I want you to make sure that the guard is about 1/4 of an inch above your board. There's a knob in the back and you just lift it up and down. That way my smallest finger doesn't have enough room to get under this ball bearing to get into the blade. So the only way that you can cut yourself for the most part is if my finger is extended in line with that blade, which is much harder to do because most people are quick enough to pull a finger back should they get close to the blade. When you're cutting, and I'll raise this up for some of it just so you can see the blade, make sure that you're not getting a burn on the end. Sometimes as you cut, the blade will actually burn the end of your board just a little bit. Usually that'll mean that it's dull or you're going a little bit too slow. Most of the time it's because it's dull. If the blade gets dull, let me know. I have a couple more in the back. I can just switch the blade to a new one. As you're cutting, generally speaking, let's say I'm just cutting a straight line like this. If I just want to cut that off, it only cuts straight forward. So I have to line it up like this so the line is pointing at the saw blade. I've had a number of kids put it in so like this, thinking that they'll get this cut. So what happens is they start cutting here and they realize as they get to the line, I'm going the wrong direction. I'll end up cutting straight through it if I'm not careful. So they stop, twist the board, and then try to keep cutting. Now, when I turn this on for a moment, have a look at the blade, you'll see that the blade kind of clicks. It does this, little at a time. The reason that happens is because they put this in and twisted the blade and bent it. Fortunately, it didn't break, so that's good. However, now that it's doing this, it's going to leave it's going to click as it goes through the board and leave your line a little bit more jagged than it should be. So be careful to always line your board up straight at what you're cutting. It needs to be relatively a straight line. If I need to turn a little bit as I'm going, that's fine, but it needs to be pointing at the blade. Why is it important to keep moving forward if you're cutting a curve? Well, let's put a simple curve on there. Okay, like that, say. As I'm cutting, I know I would need to start this curve facing this way and then cut and turn as I go. If I stop turning, let's say I'm cutting off of the line, I'll use my pencil on this one. I'm cutting and I start getting off the line. If I stop, twist to get it back in line and then start going back again, I've just bent the blade, and most of the time that'll actually break the blade. Like I said, this must be a good one because it didn't break the time the kid twisted. However, by stopping, I'm forcing the blade to twist and then try to start cutting again. So what I should have done is either back it out and start cutting again, or just turned into that curve to get back on my line. And then I'd come back and clean that up later. So why is it important to keep moving forward? Because you could either break or twist the blade, similar to number 3 on your sheet. How do you keep from having to back out of a long curve? Well, let's just use the same curve. If this curve is tight enough that you don't think the blade can make it around in one pass, simply make what are called relief cuts. Relief cuts are simply some little cuts that go in and out again. So if I simply put it on here and go in, just to the line, the curve and back, just to the curve and out, just to the curve and out, and so forth. I've made these 3 and I've got a couple more to make. Now when I go back and cut, I cut to here, this piece falls off. Then I cut the rest here and that falls off and this falls off and so forth. There's no wood left on my board to pinch the blade as I'm turning it. You've always got to push forward, but if it's too tight of a curve, say like this, I've got to put those relief cuts in there to relieve the pressure, hence the name. So my blade doesn't get pinched and start burning the wood or snapping in two. Number 6, if you're following a pencil line while cutting, we need to cut just off of the line. So again, let's say I've got a curve here. Let's say that. I need to stay off the line just a little bit. Say I want to cut this piece out. I want to stay just inside this line, about a 1/16 to an 1/8 of an inch, so that this line, the original, is still there. Because when I'm done cutting, this blade does not leave a very smooth edge at all. It's always very jagged. It's got a lot of lines on it that we need to sand out. So if I cut on the line and then sand, I'm now here about a 1/16 to an 1/8 smaller than I wanted. So if I stay off the line the whole way through and then sand it, I still have a line to sand too. I can see where I need to stop. So you want to cut just off of your original pencil line so that you can sand down to that line and it's the right size. Number 7 is pretty obvious. You never want to put your finger in line with the blade. That especially is your thumb. That typically is what I've seen get into the blades is a thumb. So you need to be careful. Nothing in line with the blade you don't intend to get cut. If the blade does break while you're cutting, going around a sharp corner, whatever, this one's a little bit different than the others. Because I have seen the blade break and it comes around the top, the end hits the table and kind of shoots off to the side. I don't want my hands here where I'm cutting. It could slice across my fingers and I don't want that. So make sure if it breaks, you'll hear a very loud bang and everything stops moving for a moment. You want to back off. Get your hands out of the way. Once I know nothing is going to be shooting out at all, then go ahead and turn it off and I will change the blade and see if there's any damage and we'll fix that. How do you back out of a long curvy cut? Well, let's say I've got a cut that I can't back out, or I can't cut all the way through, I mean. Nice sharp curves. For some reason I have to stop there and pull it back out again. So I've got it here, made the cut, I've stopped, now I got to pull it back out. Now remember I said there's no ball bearing on here to keep it from falling off forward. If I pull this out and I give it just a little too hard of a tug, the blade will fall off the wheel. And if that happens, we have to turn it off and see if there's damage and reset it and realign it and so forth. So simply turn off the machine, let it come to a complete stop, and then pull it out. I can give it a good yank with it not running, and it will stay on the wheels, and they'll stay aligned. So simply turn it off if you're afraid you might pull it off the track. How do you cut around a sharp 90-degree corner? That's the last question on your sheet. Let's see here. Put a dark blue line here and here. Now normally, if I have a long line and a short line, I would always cut the short one first because I want to back out of the shorter line. I always want to back out of the shorter line, less chance of pulling it off the blade. And then I'd cut the long one and this would fall away. Now let's say for whatever reason, I do not want to back out. I just want to cut and finish the cut without pulling back out of the wood. Here's how you do it. Cut all the way up this line to your other line and stop. Back off about an inch, only about an inch, and then round cut that corner out. So now this is gone. Then I simply back cut right here, and then this is gone. So 1, 2, 3. Cut up to the line, back out and round cut that corner, and then back cut whatever's left. 3 steps. So when you're cutting, it doesn't matter to me if you're cutting with your hands like this, both sides, or even just one-handed. Either way works just fine. Turn it on, and I can cut like this. Now my finger is somewhat in line with the blade, so I'm just going to move it out of the way as I get close and cut it off. You can turn it, you can cut it, whatever you want. So as you can, it's hard to see, but let's see if I can scuff that up. It doesn't leave a very good cut. It got a lot of lines on there. It's harder to see on the camera. One of the last questions on the test, what if I have a narrow piece of wood that I need to cut in half? Now what I don't want is my fingers pinching the blade next to it. It's too easy to get in there. So here's what you do. Let me bring that down just a little bit more. Turn it on and cut as far as you can. Now I'm starting to get a little nervous. I'm within about an inch. Simply reach around the back further away and just pull it the rest of the way out. Very simple. So if you got a narrow piece of wood, Feel free to pull it and get it out the back when you're done. And then all of my scrap pieces go into the trash. I just don't want you to throw them on the floor. Sawdust on the floor here, it's almost like an ice skating rink. These don't help. They actually will make you roll your ankle a little bit here and there. So make sure to throw everything away into the trash. So the bandsaw, we use the bandsaw mostly for in-between projects. You got some extra time, you can make a plaque, cut out letters, whatever, that's fine. We do use it twice on the nightstand, one for your door and once for your base trim. But as you're using the bandsaw, it's a fun machine to use, but you need to be very careful to keep your fingers out of the line of the blade, and always make sure to line up whatever you're cutting directly in line with the blade, so you don't have to twist. So doing that will make sure that the saw is able to cut correctly and that you stay safe.